Hello, folks. So we're back to our weekly live Q&A, right? And we're covering the subject of how to read readings, which is kind of related to how to read a chart, but it's not exactly the same thing. I'm going to try to explain things to you from your perspective rather than the astrologer's perspective, but inevitably we'll get both points of view. Let me see. YouTube is telling me something problematic here. Everything's okay. You can see me. You can hear me. Right? Hi, Satya. All right. So shall we get started? We'll get started here. What I want to talk... So far what we talked about is how everything is contextual. So you have to balance everything out, and then you have to set your context and go in a certain order. What I want to talk to you now about is prioritizing planets. I'm not sure. Let me check out. Let me see what this error message is getting here. You need to change the video resolution. The current resolution is not supported for this configuration. Why doesn't... I don't know how to do that. Yeah? You can hear me right now? You could see me like typing on the computer? It's all good? Yeah, it stopped. Well, that's Trump, so probably Trump is lying. Okay, so everything's good. All right, great. Cool. There's just a little hiccup there, technical hiccup. All right, so let's talk. We got... When you get a reading, you get a bunch of information. If you're an astrologer, you get the same problem. When you, excuse me, when you do a reading, you have to give a bunch of information. And when you're not an astrologer, you have the problem is that you get a whole bunch of information. So what do you do with this information? You get a whole bunch of information. Like one part of your reading is saying you're gonna become a famous actress, and the other part of your reading is saying you're going to be a housewife, and the other part of your reading is saying you're never going to get married, and the other part of your reading is saying you're going to have 5 kids. Right? This is often a huge problem. If you read your readings that you get carefully, you find that they have conflicting statements. They're all over the place. So what do you do with that? Because one thing is interpreting, for example, one thing is interpreting your sun in this sign, and the other thing is interpreting your Jupiter in that sign and house. And so they're just giving you interpretations of those isolated things. So you're getting contradictory information, right? So I want to talk about how you deal with that. Okay? So one way that people deal with it is they're just going to fixate. I want to advise you to avoid the fixation route. Fixate means that you will, like, let's say if I say you're never going to get married, and then I'd say you're going to have 5 kids. So the fixate approach is you're going to pick one of those two and fixate on it. Maybe you're too fearful of never getting married, so you're just going to fixate on that and not even hear that I also said you're going to have 5 kids. Or if you're just too gung-ho about the fact that you're going to have kids, you're going to fixate on the fact that in one place I said you're going to have 5 kids, and you're not going to pay attention to the part that somewhere I said you're not going to get married. Of course, you can have 5 kids without getting married, but I'm just trying to pick something out. That, seems kind of contradictory. So don't do the fixate approach. The fixate approach is that you pick one or the other, either out of fear or out of desire. Okay, what you're going to have to... the thing about all this contradiction, it's very interesting, really, because critics of astrology will say, yeah, look at this piece of junk reading. It's all over the place. Here in one place, the guy is saying that you're going to have 5 kids. In this other place, he's saying that you're never going to have sex. So, look at this. This is bullshit. This is astrology. Ha, 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 ha. But the thing is, these are the astrological interpretations are all true. But you have to figure out how they sit together in the same truth, in the same reality, in the same room. They're going to have to interact. Each one is true in its own way, but each one affects the other. Like I said in the previous sessions that we had on this, everything is related to everything else. And that's what makes astrology complicated and difficult. Right? So, let me know if you, in the chat, if you know what I'm talking about from personal experience, where you've got these readings, because a lot of people even send me like the readings that they get, and I go down the list and I'm like, on this first sentence it says you're going to be a millionaire, and the next sentence it says you're going to be poor, and there's no effort made even to like resolve this. You've seen that? You've gotten that? You dealt with that phenomenon before? Right? People deal with that phenomenon. Like in one part it says you're going to have a great career, and the other part it says it's going to be hard for you to find a job. Both show, right? So how do you deal with that? Well, here's my advice, right? It's all about priorities. Thank you, Aman. So it's all about priorities. Let me illustrate it. Let me illustrate my advice for you with a analogy, right? Just imagine all of these different interpretations in a chart as different people in a room shouting. Or maybe not shouting, but just talking to you. But they're all talking at once. So there's a whole bunch of people saying a whole bunch of different things to you. Now, which one are you going to hear? Which one should you listen to first? Well, the thing that's going to attract your attention first is the guy who's got the loudest voice. Or the person who's attracting your attention, the most prominent person in the room will attract your attention first, right? So think of it that way. When you look at a chart, all these different planets are like different people trying to tell you stuff. And sometimes they tell you stuff that doesn't really seem to make sense together. One guy is telling you that you're going to be rich, the other guy is telling you you're going to be poor. So who do you listen to? The guy who's telling you you're going to be rich, or the guy who's telling you you're going to be poor? Don't just do it out of fear or desire. Figure out which guy has a stronger voice. And let me give you another analogy. Let's say you get 2 death threats and 2 notices of inheritance. All right? Like, in other words, let's say there's 4 people, and 2 of them want to give you $1 million, and 2 of them want to kill you or put you in jail. Right? Let's say the government sends you 4 notices. Or let's just 4 people out there. 2 of them want to give you... All right, let's just narrow it down to 2. There's 2 people. One of them wants to give you $1 million, and one of them wants to cut your throat. So, which one is going to happen? Well, they're both going to happen, right? They're both true. You're going to have to face both of these reality is that there's some dude who wants to kill you and there's some dude who wants to bless you. But which one is going to take precedence over the other? Are you going to get $1 million and then die? So that's another approach too, is just try to line them all up and put them in some kind of sequence. That's not what I advise either. You have to see this person over here who wants to give me $1 million. They don't even have $1 million. But this guy over here who wants to kill me, he's got a big machine gun. So I'm dead. So I'm going to, I have to pay attention to the promises of a person that can obviously deliver on their promises, more than to pay attention to the promises of a person that really can't deliver on their promise. Or vice versa. If you got these two people and the guy who wants to protect you and take care of you is super strong, and the guy who wants to kill you is super weak, then I'm not really in that much danger. Of course, they're both true. I'm going to have to face the reality of having this negative person in my life, but he's not actually going to be able to kill me. Right? So if we bring this back to an astrology paradigm, then let's just talk about the same exact principle with astrological terms. Let's say Jupiter's in Cancer, so you're going to be fortunate throughout your whole life. And let's say Saturn is in Aries, so you're going to be miserable your whole life. And it's in the same chart. So Saturn in Aries, you're miserable. And Jupiter in Cancer, you're totally happy. Well, how can it be? Well, how do you resolve that situation? You have to see how influential is Saturn compared to Jupiter. Which one has the greater influence in this chart? If Saturn's the one with the greater influence, that's boo-boo, you lost the it's bad luck, sorry. Because that means that the misery part is going to be more prominent than the felicity part from Jupiter, because Saturn is a more prominent planet. If Jupiter is the one that's more prominent and Jupiter is in Cancer and doing great, then you got the prize. You got lucky. Oh, great. Jupiter, that means mostly I'm felicitous, and there's of course there's going to be something in my life. It's not like you write off the Saturn and Aquarius part and ignore it, but this is going to take a back seat to the Jupiter and Cancer part. All right? I'm going to turn my attention to the comments now, and I would like to see if you guys think you understand what I'm saying, if you have any questions about what I'm saying, etc., etc. Ciao Ferreira says, what if both are equally as prominent? Okay, sometimes it may happen both are equally prominent. It's quite rare that both will be equally prominent. If both are equally prominent, though, then you got like a real mixed bag. So if both are equally prominent, then you want to say, all right, Jupiter is in Cancer in the 10th house. Saturn is in Aries in the 1st house. My misery will be related to my body. My happiness will be related to my career. Okay? So you can also do that. You want to differentiate the areas of life in which the contradicting things affect. Satya, do you assess that prominence through, in other words, he's saying, well, how do you assess the prominence? Okay, I'll address that question in a second, but this is about how to read a reading. So let me take that question, actually, that's a big question. Let me take that question at the end of look and see if there's any quicker questions to answer. Do you use Shadbala? Same basic question, right? Like, how do you figure out what planet is more prominent than the others? Prominent degree-wise, I guess everybody is asking the same basic question. Yeah, Farah Jade. Degrees. Great. Okay, so everybody wants to know this. Yeah, now Juan Diego has this interesting point. Sometimes different astrologers say different things. I mean, all the time. It's just like you go to different doctors, you get different things. So, yeah, well, that's where you have to try to figure out which one. Yeah, I mean, that's just life. Life is complicated. Different advisors see things in different ways and give you different advice. It's not just in astrology. It'll be in any subject. Different advisors will advise you differently. It's rare that everybody will be unanimous, but the part where everybody's unanimous is something you can be damn confident about. And then on the other side, you just want to see, well, which guide do I really want to be more like? Because you're going to become like the person whose advice you follow. So which guide do I really want to be more like? I'll take the prominence of that person's advice over the prominence of a guide that I don't really want to be like. I don't really want to have a life like that. Okay? All right, so let's talk briefly about how you figure out which planet is more prominent than another. Because I want this to be how to read a reading, not how to read a chart. So if it's just in the point of how to read a reading, what you should do is you should say, hey, Mr. Astrologer or Mrs. Astrologer, which one of these interpretations is more prominent? Here you told me in the beginning, 5 minutes ago, you told me I was going to be poor. And then 2 minutes ago, you told me that I would be rich. So, that's what you do as a reading. Which one is more important? What statement is more important than the other? If you're getting readings from me, then I do this. This is like the framework. Like, so for example, this is what it looks like at the beginning of the reading that you get from me, right? As soon as you get into the section on the planets, you get a graph like this, where it says, here's the prominence of your planets. Right, so you can see Jupiter has got the highest bar. So in this chart, my chart, Jupiter is the highest planet by a lot. So that means any interpretation associated with Jupiter carries a lot of weight. Whereas something associated with Mars is carrying much less weight. Because look, where Mars is not even the least prominent. It's like the second least prominence. That's like actually the lowest importance. The least prominent planet is also a bit important because it's the least. It's got some speciality to it. So interpretations associated with Venus in this chart will also be pretty important because Venus is the least prominent planet. Interpretations associated with Jupiter will be pretty important because Jupiter is the most prominent planet. You're just going to have a slightly different flavor. With the least prominent planet, you're going to be more focused on things that indicate weakness or lack. And then in this chart, you say like, okay, Rahu is the second most prominent planet, and then you can even start to come to conclusions with this information by itself. Jupiter. I don't know where Jupiter is in this chart. But I know Jupiter is the most prominent planet. I bet some traits of Jupiter are very prominent in this person, and mixed with Rahu, and mixed with Venus, because Venus is the lowest. So that's one wonderful thing. If you get the chart from me, you get this graph right in the beginning that already lays it out for you. And then the way the rest of the reading is laid out, it will go in that order. Because first impressions, on the principle of first impression, the thing that you hear first is the thing that sticks in your mind. And then the thing you hear second, you consider it against the thing you already heard first, right? So I arranged the reading in that order. So that I'll talk about Jupiter in your chart. If this was your chart, I'll talk about Jupiter's sign, Jupiter's house, Jupiter's aspects, Jupiter's yogas first. And then go on and talk about Rahu, because Rahu's next. And then probably go Venus, unless there's some planet that's over a threshold, maybe a third planet. That I have a certain threshold where I consider them to be prominent. You need to talk about them up front. Then I'll give you a shorter version of all the rest of the planets. They're less prominent. So see, that's the nice thing if you get readings from me. You don't have to worry about figuring out the prominence. But let's talk real quick about what goes into making this graph. This graph has, by the way, to explain how to use this thing, this graph has two indicators. Let me make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. Right, this graph has got, can I do this? I hope I didn't just freeze it. This graph's got two indicators. It's got the height of the bar and also the color of the bar. So the height of the bar shows you how prominent the planet is. And the color of the bar shows you the dignity of the planet, which means how positive it is. So the more green it is, the more positive. The more orange it is, the more negative. So and then there's some values in there, like, let me see, I can't even see really because it's too small. It says the prominence of Jupiter is 23, the prominence of Rahu is 18, the positivity of Jupiter is 58, the positivity of Rahu is 60, and the positivity of the Sun is 69. Right? So it gives you some numeric value, but then you can just get the feeling for the whole thing by the colors and the size of the bars. So that's how you use it if you got this report. So the point is, if you got a very tall planet that has a very orange color, then that's a warning flag that this planet can easily signify its negative interpretations. So if you get a planet like that in a situation that brings out some negative interpretation, that negative interpretation is something you need to pay attention to. It's not something that takes a back seat. Whereas if you have something that's on a low bar, like a mediocre bar, but it's real red and orange, yeah, it's something in your life that's difficult to deal with, but it's not some big, huge thing that ruins you or really sends you for a major tumble in your life. And vice versa, if you have a really tall bar that's very green, then here's a planet that is going to really be able to deliver on whatever good things, whatever good interpretations it has based on its sign and its house. Okay, where if it's a mediocre bar and it's nice and dark green, like Mars in my chart, right? It's pretty nicely green, but it's kind of a mediocre height. So big deal. Yeah, there's some nice things about Mars. You can be competitive and win a contest and everything, but it's not like it's a big part of your life. It's a subtext. It's a small thing. You see, but if you didn't know that, and if by chance you start looking at the guy's Mars, you start thinking, oh, this guy's an athlete. He's got Mars in Leo with the sun. He's so masculine. He's so, he's such a competitor. Which, fine, it's something true. It's something true about this person, me, but it's not a major theme. It's a minor subtext that takes a backseat to a lot of other things and blends with a lot of other things. So that's the beauty of figuring out what's the prominence of one planet over the other. Okay, now, I know I've been putting this off. You want to know how you figure it out. So let me scroll it down to show you. I'm switch it over to this one, which has just got it just has the raw details. And when you switch it down, I hope it's in here. Yeah. So you get this too. These are like the appendix pages at the end of the reports that I give, where I actually give you the math or the numbers, some of the numbers involved in making the graph, making the different calculations. So what you want to do to figure out, this is the long way to do it. And you're not going to really be able to do it just by hearing me explain it in the next 2 minutes. But just to give you an idea of what goes into this, what you want to do is get at least some version of Shadbala as your starting point. Okay, Shadbala means Bala means strength. So Vedic astrology is really based on a couple of fundamental calculations, one of which is Bala, Shadbala, which is described in Prasha or Shastra and probably in other texts as well, which give a lot of math, mathematically oriented texts. So it's a very, very important calculation. It assesses the Bala or the muscle power, the strength of a planet. Shad means 6. It has 6 categories of things that it evaluates. So it evaluates strength based on 6 categories. Each category is subcategories. So you get like a numeric value for each planet of how much power they have. But this is raw power. So Shadbala is a very important number to use, like, for example, when planets are doing conjunctions. You want to know which one's going to dominate the other one in that conjunction, which one's symbolism is going to take the priority over the other one. You just look at the Shadbala. Straight, directly at the Shadbala. The planet with the higher Shadbala dominates the conjunction and sets the tone for the interpretation. Right? So if it's Jupiter-Moon conjunction, with Jupiter is the higher Shadbala than the Moon, then the Moon is modifying Jupiter. But if it's the Moon-Jupiter conjunction with the Moon as the higher Shadbala, then Jupiter is modifying the Moon. right? So Jupiter-Moon conjunction generally means the mind becomes very good and honest and happy. But if the Moon is the higher one, then that's your interpretation. Your mind is really modified by good stuff. If Jupiter is the higher one, it's basically the same thing, but it's more like your morals and your sense of right and wrong is very honest and deep, because it's Jupiter being modified by the Moon. Okay? So that's one way to use Shadbala, but that's not going to give you the answer of how prominent a planet is in a chart. Shadbala alone won't. And that's why Parashara gives some kind of what I feel is a quicker or simplified or an edited version of a concept that you have to judge the phase of the planet, or how it aligns with the sun and how it aligns with the moon and the ascendant. All right, so I elaborated on what he gave in Parashara Shastra and came up with this system of how you can modify the Shadbala to see how much of the planet's inherent strength can actually be used in a chart. If I'm a really strong guy, like let's say I'm a great warrior, but I have no chance to fight, then okay, I'm a great warrior, but it never really does anything because I have no chance to fight. There's no chance to defend anybody. But if I'm a really great warrior and there's some bad guys attacking, then bam, then that's really prominent. Sparks start to fly. Right? So it's like that too with the planet. A planet may have really high Shadbala, but be tucked out of the way in the chart where it doesn't influence the sun, doesn't influence the moon, doesn't influence the ascendant, doesn't influence the first lord. And okay, maybe if it conjoins something else, maybe it aspects something else, it may still have an effect. But that strength that it has doesn't really get to be used. But if a planet, even with a moderate Shadbala, is really, lined up in geometric angles to the ascendant, the first lord, the sun, the moon, then that planet really takes over the chart. So that's what all these numbers up here are considering. Right? And then also if it's in prominent houses, etc. Now, that's how you do it mathematically with numbers. If you want to try to just figure out a way to do it semi-easy with your eyes, there's a couple of simple principles to go by. A simple principle is if you have a planet, one of the simple principles is Kendras. Kendras is the houses 4, 7, 10, and 1. The pink ones that you're looking at here on the screen right now. Those houses are the main stage, the center stage in the sky. So planets occupying Kendras are more prominent than planets that don't, especially the fewer there are of them in there. The planet that occupies the Kendra becomes prominent, but if it's got to share that prominence with a bunch of other guys, then it's less significant. So that's one way to easily eyeball this particular chart and see that Jupiter is obviously a really prominent planet because it's the only guy in a Kendra. All right, that's one way to eyeball. The other way to eyeball things is to just look at the ascendant's degree and see if the other degrees are close to it. Like Jupiter is at 28, the ascendant degree is 25. That's another reason why Jupiter is so prominent. They line up well. Jupiter is affecting. Saturn is at 21. So that makes Saturn a little prominent, but it also means Jupiter is affecting the first lord as well as the ascendant. That's another thing to do. And finally, another thing to do is look at aspects. Planets that receive or give a lot of aspects become more important. So this is how you would see that Rahu is getting the prominence that it has, because it's got tons of planets on the other side looking at it, aspecting it. Okay, so those are some rule of thumbs for how to see how prominent a planet is. How aligned up does it get with the ascendant? How much does it have the center stage, the Kendra, to itself? And how much aspect is it getting and giving? Those are the three basics if you have to simplify the system and boil it down to that. That's what I would boil it down to. Any questions? Or you just come and get a reading from me and I'll give you this graph. And then you get it. You get the full calculation. So let me know if you have any questions about what I just said. Meanwhile, I'll try to resize this. All right, I'm checking your comments now. Okay. What else? Let's see if you got. So, did I answer your questions about how you calculate prominence? Does prominence have anything to do with dignity? Dignity is one of the factors that works into Shadbala. However, I separated it. In my readings and assessments, I separate Shadbala. Traditionally, dignity is included prominently in Shadbala, but I separate them. It's because I think that I'm using the Shadbala a little differently than the way that they used to use it. Because I developed this system, which elaborated on what they indicated in the old books. So I prefer to just keep it separate. So in my system, I cleanly separate dignity and bala. But in the strict Parashari system, he keeps dignity and bala together. You can decide which one you want if you're an astrologer doing these calculations. What else we got? So, do you feel like you understand it? So, you shouldn't have to. Remember in the first session I said, if you want to get a good reading, you have to kind of know a bit about astrology. But honestly, you shouldn't have to be able to prioritize your planets. Right? This is complicated stuff. So, this should be one of the things that you assess the astrologer on, if you like. This is my suggestion. Whether or not they have a sense for this. Whether some people are overt and technical about it, some people are intuitive about it, but they still have a sense. They might not talk about it in terms of numbers and draw graphs about it, but they're clearly prioritizing, saying, no, this is more important than that. I know that over here I said that you're going to be rich, and over here I said that you're going to be poor, but the part where I said that you're going to be rich is more important than the part where I said you're going to be poor. If you have an astrologer that talks to you that way, then I would have faith in that astrologer, because obviously they know this principle that some things are more dominant than other things. Or you might have them technically. You might want to because I like to give a report in a written form like this, so I had to kind of work it out so that it would be cut and dry, not intuitive and mushy. So, I calculate it out, give you numbers, lay it all out for you in the order. This is the order. This is the most prominent planet. Let's talk about that first. About how to read a reading, you should just realize that, hey, if this reading is just giving me a bunch of interpretations without telling me anything about the priority, I probably shouldn't dive into this reading. Because I got to tell you, I made a post about this on Facebook recently, which was to the effect that you shouldn't give people readings or interpretations or predictions that they haven't asked for, or that they're not confident. If you're not confident that somebody really knows what they're talking about, then don't listen to them tell you who you are and what you're going to be. Okay? Because it's very damaging. It's very, very damaging to hear people's opinions about who you are and what you're going to be and what you're going to do. It's going to affect you very deeply. Don't just let any old person tell you that. Okay. So, we're going to talk about yogas next. So let me know if there's any less questions on this. Satya wants to know about fatal degrees, Mrityubhag. I don't think that it doesn't change prominence in a sense, but in a very specific sense, it changes the prominence, because a Mrityubhag usually indicates a big flaw in what that planet signifies, and it usually plays out on a very practical, tangible thing that the planet signifies. Usually, maybe often, if not always, physical health. So for those who don't know, Mrityubhag means a fatal degree. And every planet has a particular degree in every sign, which is deadly to it, which exposes some flaw in it. The logic for why the degrees are there is unknown. It's just something that's been handed down since the old days. And it's interesting, and I use it. I find it to be a reliable thing. I always look in a chart to see are there any Mritubhagas in this chart. And if there are, I put a little flag in my mind that remember this planet has a Mritubhaga. Dennis, thank you for your wonderful review. All right, you guys want to go on? Oh, really? You have this in Western astrology too? It's called fatal degree? No, it's not 29. That 29 is fatal degree. It's just every planet has a different degree in every sign. That's decided to be its fatal degree. All right, so let's move on. Planets should be prioritized. It's very important that you get your priorities. Then you can start to look at planets. But there's one step prior to, even after you've looked at this. I would look at this at the beginning, if you can get a table like this. If you can figure out which planet is more prominent than the others, I would look at it from the very beginning, because it tells you a very important basic pulse of the chart. Remember, that was what we were talking about in the last session, is that you really need to know the basic pulse of a chart before you dive in and start interpreting details. You really need to know the overall nature of a person before you start getting specific about them, right? So this is also very helpful. With a chart like this, you just get a feeling for this person right away. Like our Jupiter and Rahu are prominent and Venus is low. Okay, I think I kind of understand what this chart is going to work out like. What it can do. The kinds of things that this chart can do and can't do. This probably can't be the chart of an athlete. This probably can't be the chart of like a government leader, because the sun isn't way up there. This could really be the chart of a priest. This could be the chart of a life coach, right? This could be the chart of somebody who's got really weird morals or unconventional morals, who turns moral things upside down. This is kind of a person that's into beauty and love and things, but kind of feels, but it's low. It's something low about it, something weird about it. Venus is down. I wonder what that is. Let's look in this chart and see what this is, right? So after this, then what you should do next is consider certain yogas. So let's start to talk about yogas. Yoga, let's say why is the word yoga used? Yoga means combination. When things link together, it's called a yoga. So if you get endowed with something, that's called a yoga. If you match with somebody, marry with somebody, that's called a yoga. Or some version of that same word, yuti, yoga. So, excuse me. So when we talk about yogas and astrology, we're talking about how several factors come together. So it's the concept that, actually the very concept of yoga shows the concept that we were talking about in the first and second sessions, which is that you shouldn't take anything out of context. Everything is related to everything else. The very concept of yoga is that you have to start considering a lot of things at once. Like if the moon is in this house and Jupiter is in that house, then this. So it's not just if the moon is in this house, then this, or if Jupiter is in that house, then this, but if both. That's like where yogas go. So they start synthesizing bigger things, putting more things together. Now, there's simple yogas and there's smaller yogas, let's say, and there's bigger. There's all different kinds of yogas. There's some super detailed yogas. There's some very basic, generalized yogas. There's some yogas that look at a whole bunch of things. And there's some yogas that just look at a few things. Like, is Jupiter in this house and moon in that house? No? Okay. This yoga isn't active. Is yes? Okay, then this yoga is active. But there's other yogas like look at the whole chart. If all the planets are underneath the horizon, then this interpretation is valid. So there's different kinds of yogas, and the ones you should look at the beginning of considering your chart, or the ones you should ask to hear about at the beginning of asking questions in your reading, are the basic general yogas. They're so important. And so let's go over some of them. Okay, let's go over what some of them are and how to use the information that they give and not misuse the information that they give. Because a huge mistake is to think, hey, look, let's see, for example, like let's say, hey, look, I have 3 planets in Upachaya house from the moon, so I have Dana Yoga, so I'm going to be rich. It's not the type of yoga that this Dana Yoga is about. What the Dana Yoga means is this chart can go towards wealth. This chart can go towards happiness, improvement, prosperity, because it's a generalized yoga. Whereas on the other hand, if you had a Dana Yoga on the most prominent planet in your chart, and it says and then you can think, I'm going to be rich. Okay? Okay, let's look at some of these yogas, see what they are. And this is also where the teachers of Vedic astrology have really left behind a lot of good stuff for us to get the overall pulse of a chart, right? So now, this one is my invention. It's not a Vedic one, but let me show you the ones that are Vedic first. Like, for example, this one, the Vedic astrology texts say that you should tally up the elements in the chart to see what the balance. These are called Sankey Yogas. That you're tallying things up to get a whole sum of the whole chart. Sankhya means counting. So you count things up and get a whole sum of the whole chart. So let me show you how to use this one. All right. This one gives you a bunch of visual information. This is the balance of the Rashi elements, the balance of the elements in the zodiac in my chart. It shows that there's 2 ways to look at it. So at the top, there's these kind of like a horizontal pie chart where you could see that there's a lot of earth in this chart. There's a lot of water. There's not so much air. But the really valuable thing here is the way it's shown on below that. But not a lot of people understand how to use this, so I want to take a second to explain what this chart graph on the bottom is actually showing. What this graph is actually showing on the bottom is not that Earth is great, that the Earth element is great, and so therefore you should interpret things like prosperity, stability, financial success, etc. What it's saying is actually fire and water are great, because what you want to have is balance. With elements, you want to have things in balance. So the elements which wind up being balanced, they perform well. The elements which become either excessive or deficient, they cause problems. And so the extent to which a bar goes away from the center shows you the extent to which it becomes problematic. If it's going towards the right, then it's a problem of being too excessive, and if it's going to the left, then it's a problem of being too deficient. So actually after tabulating all the Rashis in this chart, and this is not just a straight tabulation. This is a tabulation based on the prominence of the planet. It's factored against the prominence of a planet. A prominent planet in a water sign is going to give water more importance than a non-prominent planet. And it's also based on the Vargas. It includes the Varga elements. So what this one is saying is, all right, this person's got a bit too much earth and kind of a lot, not enough air. So you would give some kind of interpretation on this to the effect that the guy's too serious or too unmovable, too stubborn, doesn't really compromise enough. And that's with the earth being too high. But if it was way off to the right, then it would be a big problem. See? And if this one is just kind of sort of too much, so it becomes a problem sometimes, but it's not like, wow, this guy, you can't even, just don't deal with this guy, he's annoying, right? And then the air going down is like, does this guy know how to relax? Does he know how to just enjoy and do nothing and chill out? Not really. He probably doesn't know how to do that so well. He probably needs help doing that so well. For me, that's my wife. Why? Because the air is so deficient. Right? So he doesn't really know. Maybe he's got problem with communication. Like, okay, earth is up and air is down. Maybe too blunt in the communication because of the air going down. All right, so that's how you use this chart. You tabulate all the elements in a chart, and then you put them on a median graph. And the ones that are on the median that are balanced, those guys do good. Fire is good. This guy knows how to lead people. This guy knows how to be a leader, be a boss. He's not shy. He's going to give him a command position, takes it, no problem. Water's great. Oh, he's got deep feelings. He's got intuition. He's got introspection. He's fine with that. But when it gets a little bit too stubborn, whatever. When the thing goes out of balance, then you take the negative quality of that element. When the thing is in balance, you take the positive quality of that element. Okay? Dennis is totally cool, but it's kind of a stupid place to express a critique of the reading. I mean, just send me an email or something. Because obviously I'm not going to be able to change my whole reading right on the spot just by reading your think that it should be more detailed. And probably you're wrong, because it shouldn't be more detailed. People are way too detailed, and they don't get the fundamental basics of what this stuff is talking about. But all right. So there's no problems with what you're saying, but I just think it's in the wrong time, in the wrong place. So we want to do the same thing with modes. Elements are like earth, water, fire, air. Modes are cardinal, fixed, dual. I call them modes. I guess other people call them triplicities, quadruplicities. They call the elements. So you do the same exact tabulation and then lay it out on the same chart, so you can say, all right, this particular person doesn't really have any problems with the modes. The dual, the fixed, the cardinal, it's all in balance. If the cardinal was like really low, then the person can't really get stuff started. And so this will also, you want this to modify your assessment of the elements. Like with the elements, you see that the earth is really high. Well, not really high, but it's a little too high. So we think this guy's a little too stubborn. If this fixed mode was also really high, then that would multiply that, right? That guy's really too stubborn. He's came up twice, okay? But here, the fixed mode is in balance, so I guess it's not that over the top. Something's a problem with the earth element, but it's not a big deal. Now that we've looked at these two, let me show you this other one, which I developed, which is the balance of nakshatra types. So this doesn't have to do with Rashis, but now it has to do with nakshatras, and it's very interesting because there's six types of nakshatras plus another one called mixed. So basically, there's just 6 unique types of nakshatras. Some are mobile, quick, sweet. So I give you information about what each one is good for. Mobile is like adventurous, pleasure-oriented. Quick means getting things, really knowing how to do things quickly, effectively. Sweet, tender, beautiful, so stuff like that. So you can see, you put it on the same graph, the median. The ones which are in the balance, they perform well. But the ones that are out of balance, there's where you get your... No, actually, this is not too much strong. Oh, for you? I don't know. But on this chart right here, the strong nakshatras are in balance. So the person is strong in a good way. The enduring thing is pretty high up. The enduring thing is really high up, so it means like, I think like you're maybe too persistent. Right? Would you guys agree? Probably my whole thing. You could easily agree with that observation that I'm probably a little bit too persistent. And then bitter being down, what does that mean? What does it mean when the thing goes down? Not bitter enough. And it's pretty far down. So this is an interesting thing, and it might not be obvious about me, but it also has... at this stage, you want to just put the interpretations in your head. Don't marry them yet, because these are not final interpretations, right? But put them in your head. You're going to marry the final interpretations later on after you mix everything. But somewhere along the line, you're going to come across an interpretation of the moon in this chart. You're going to see it's in the 6th house. And it's going to inform you, again, what this low bitter thing means. Which means God, bitter things really are a drag for this person. The person gets easily tired out by any kind of jealousy, any kind of intrigue, espionage. It really annoys the person too much. They can't deal with it. It's it's not healthy. They're too weak in that regard. Okay, so that's how you use these 3 graphs. So far, so I haven't really seen any questions. So let's look at these. Now I want to show you some of these other classic Vedic yogas, right? This one is actually literally called the Sankey Yoga. This Sankey Yoga means, it's called here the enjoyer. Harsha, this particular chart is Harsha Yoga. Harsha means thrilled, excited. Wants to enjoy. That's why I call it the enjoyer in English. So the way that you do this yoga is you count how many signs are occupied by real planets. Real planets means don't worry about nodes. Rahu and Ketu don't worry about. So you got 7 planets. You can have a maximum of 7 signs occupied. And again, this is not the kind of thing that you marry the interpretation, but the interpretation is going to tell you this chart could really easily do this. If the chart says nothing along these lines, then this is not going to happen, right? Here's a chart. Here's a yoga that says the enjoyer. The yoga forms when the planets, excluding Rahu and Ketu, occupy a total of 5 houses, and then the reference is Paladipika, right? It says this, then it gives an interpretation. This yoga suggests seeing life as an opportunity to experience happiness and beauty. It also suggests an artistic or creative mindset. So these yogas, the Sankey Yogas, show the person's outlook on life. And Harsha Yoga means they think that life is something to enjoy. So they want to experience beauty, happiness, or they probably want to get involved in creating beauty and happiness. So it's like an artist's yoga. So now, does that mean that any person with a Harsha Yoga is an artist? No, but any person who has a Harsha Yoga has a very good chance of being an artist. If there's some other stuff in their chart that's very artistic, then it's going to multiply against this yoga, because this yoga is in the background. Okay? So the other ones, basically also what this Sankey Yoga teaches you is the more the planets spread out, the better it is for the chart overall. And the more they clump up, the more difficult it becomes for the chart overall. Because all the interpretations for the fewer the signs occupied get more and more harsh. And the interpretations, the more the number gets towards 7, the more nice and beautiful the interpretations get. So like 7, for example, is called Vina Yoga. It's just so beautiful, and they're very learned, and they know a lot about everything, and they're very well-rounded. And 6 is Dharma Yoga. They're very good people, moral, responsible people. 5 is Harsha Yoga. They experience beauty. They're into beauty. 4 is like the midpoint. All planets in 4 houses, called Kedara. They're practical people. But they may see life as a chore. They're kind of chore-oriented, work-oriented, kind of Saturn-y, Capricorn-y yoga. Lower than 4, it starts to get harsh. 3 is called Shula Yoga. It means it's a spear. So there's going to be a lot of competition. You're going to need a lot of bravery and strength. They'll see life more as a contest or a fight. 2, I think, is Yuga. Yuga, which means it's all just in a pair. There's just 2 signs occupied. And this is like polarity. The people are going to flip around a lot. Things are not going to be stable. And then the fewest number of planets, if all the planets are in 1, that's called Gola. They're all in a ball. And that's a very difficult thing. So does it mean your life is wrecked if you have a Gola Yoga? No, but it means that if whatever is difficult in the chart can multiply against that Gola Yoga. Okay? So this is a real important thing to do. Tabulate your elements, tabulate your modes, tabulate your nakshatra types, count how many. This one's really easy to do. You just count how many signs are occupied by your planets. Then there's things called the Dana Yogas, which are simple Dana Yogas, which are more in terms of actual emotional prosperity, because they're based on the moon, but they have some bearing on financial prosperity too. This is just a yoga if you get the moon in Cancer or a friendly Navamsha sign, and then also getting aspects from Jupiter or Venus, and it depends on whether, if it's Jupiter during the day, then it's a positive yoga, and if the aspect is Jupiter at the night, it's a negative yoga. If it's Venus during the night, it's positive. If it's Venus during the day, it's negative. So it's just going to show you that your moon is okay. Like the yoga is showing that your moon is getting an aspect from a nice planet that's in its element. That's why the night and the daytime is in there. So that means that you get some support, you get some security. You're emotionally secure, you're emotionally protected, nurtured, if you have this yoga. So then anything in the chart which is negative on emotional things can't multiply it so well against this, you see? So then Spirit Vehicle is asking questions like the Heights Yoga, Parvata, or Shakata. Parvata is one of the ones we should look at up in the front. It's a prominent yoga. And Shakata is a specific yoga. It's specific to a planet, which would be Jupiter or the moon. So you, which one is more prominent? It's different. The prominence is different. These yogas, like for example, tallying your elements, that's very prominent. It's very important to look at the beginning, but it's not very specific. Like I said, you can't marry the interpretation based on that. But this is something that the other interpretations multiply off of. So in a sense, these yogas like Parvata, Raja Yoga, Dhana Yoga, they, or you may have a Dridra Yoga, which is the opposite of a Dhana Yoga. They're very important because you have to look at them right away first, think about them first, but they don't specifically make results, they just multiply other results. Whereas a yoga like Shakata, it's specific to a planet. That yoga will specifically make a result, especially if it can multiply off of a background yoga. Natasha asks, how do you know if a planet is visible or invisible? That's real easy. You just, any planet that's above this line, that goes horizontally, is visible in the sky. So you just draw a line from the ascendant to the descendant, from the east, that will give you a line from the eastern horizon to the western horizon. Any planet above that line is in the sky. You could see it. You could probably see it. I mean, technically you couldn't see Mars when I was born because it was in the sun. And technically you couldn't see any of these planets because the sun was out or the sun was setting. Maybe you actually may have been able to see Jupiter and Venus. Yeah, you would have been able to see Venus and Jupiter when I was born. In the dusky sky, in the dark blue sky. Because you can see where the sun is, how close it is to sunset. You know how bright Jupiter and Venus are. They're high up there. And then you can see any planet below that line is nighttime. Atmakarika I don't use. It's a different system than what I use. So back to these yogas. It's another kind of prosperity yoga. This is a real simple one I talked about. If the moon has planets supporting it. Another way the moon can get support is having planets in Upachaya houses. So we're out of time, but there's other yogas that are way too important for us not to go over. So next week I want to talk about, these yogas are super important as background yogas. The moon's neighbors, the sun's neighbors, the ascendant's neighbors if there's any, and there's the empowerment yogas. All right, so let's go over that. Shakat yoga means that you will be a rickshawwala. That's what shakat means. You're pulling a rickshaw. So yeah, now that's the symbol. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but that's the symbol of what happens. Can it multiply off of something that also says you're going to be a rickshawwala and pull somebody's chariot, pull somebody's car? If it multiplies off a bunch of things that say that, then yeah, you're going to be a rickshawwala. If you don't have anything for Shakat yoga to magnify off of, to multiply off of, if you got all kinds of dana and prosperity in the background of your chart, then Shakata yoga means that you just lose some money sometimes, or you lose some fortune, you don't get a promotion when you could have got it. Okay? Yeah, we'll do our show next week. Satya Sangha asks about lonely moon. That's another yoga we should talk about too. But that's what we'll talk about when we talk about moon neighbors. Yeah, we're going to do a show next week. Yogas in the Navamsha. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. I haven't formed my opinion about that yet. I think it's good, probably. But it would be secondary, very secondary to the yogas that are in the main chart. Tash asks, can you only have one nakshatra since the nakshatra refers to the moon? Thank you, Neil. Even though you can break the other areas into navamshas? No. Look at what a navamshas are. This is the navamsha sky. So here you can see there's so many navamshas occupied by the planets. Jupiter is occupying Chitra. Mercury is occupying Magha with Ketu. Venus in Purva Palguni. Okay, ascendant in Uttarashad. Moon in Rohini. Saturn in Kritika. Rahu at Satabhishak. These are the nakshatras together with the rashis. Okay, so the moon's nakshatra is quite prominent. Look at the first video in the series to see how you use the nakshatras straight off in the beginning of your reading. The ascendant nakshatra, and you compare it to the moon nakshatra. And the moon nakshatra is particularly important, but every nakshatra is important. You know my feelings on D9 nakshatra. I think it's ridiculous. There's no such thing as D9 nakshatras. D9 is a division of the Rashi. D means division, right? It's called Nava Amsha. Amsha means division. So D9 is a division of a Rashi. 9 parts inside a Rashi. The nakshatras are not parts of Rashis. Nakshatras are deep space in the stars. They don't get divided by Amshas. They're not parts of Rashis either. Okay. Great. I'm glad everybody was here. Thanks so much. I will see you next week. Yeah, Sonia, yogas from the moon are important, but you wouldn't take them as your first line of interpretation. You look to them second. Okay, thanks everyone. Gotta end it sometime, so we'll end it now. Hari.